Hello and welcome to Newsroom, live from Islamabad, and I'm Sharmeen Ali. Gunmen killed 32 people during a deadly attack in Kabul, and this was on Saturday, and apparently the group IS is responsible for this attack, and the Taliban has distanced themselves from this attack, and this is days after the United States and the Taliban agreed on a peace deal, and it was hoped that this can be the way forward towards an intra-Afghan dialogue and a proper peace process in Afghanistan. We're going to be talking about this and how these attacks and the prisoner swap, which has been delayed by President Ashraf Ghani, are actually thwarting the efforts for this peace deal and for peace to go forward in Afghanistan. Also, due to the world economic slowdown because of the coronavirus causing a slowdown in the Chinese production, the UN Conference on Trade and Development has said that Pakistan is one of the 20 most affected countries due to the slowdown of Chinese production, and other countries that have been affected are the EU as well as the United States and the United Kingdom as well. Also, we saw on Sunday Aurat March, which took place on 8th March, which was International Women's Day. Women rallied all over the country in different cities in Pakistan, organized by a diverse range of people all over the country. And we saw that they were demanding their equal rights, as well as there was a march and a shout out against the misogyny and patriarchy which exists and is inherent in Pakistan. And there were different reactions to this rally earlier on in the week, and also yesterday in Islamabad, where we saw a clash happen in Islamabad, where peaceful protesters were attacked by religious groups having a side-by-side rally with the Aurat March protesters. Also, over the weekend, Pakistan Army colonel was martyred in Dera Ismail Khan in an operation against militants. Mr. Colonel Mujibur Rahman was martyred in a counter-terrorism operation in Dera Ismail Khan. And the colonel is survived by a widow and 3 sons and a daughter. Also, Prime Minister Imran Khan today wished the Hindu community in Pakistan a very happy Holi, and because it's a festival of lights in Pakistan, and Prime Minister Imran Khan has always respected the other religious diversity in the religious communities which exist in Pakistan. So we will begin our program now with our guest who's with us in our studios. We have with us Dr. Mansoor Afridi, who's a foreign affairs expert, and he's also the head of international relations in the Islamic University. And we'll begin with the attacks in Kabul, which killed 32 people, and in a political rally. And also in this attack, the chief executive, Dr. Abdullah, narrowly escaped. And we'll be talking about this in this segment. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our program. So, sir, this attack that we saw on Saturday, it was a very deadly attack. There were about 60 people injured. And apparently in the middle of this peace process, we saw an earlier attack last week on military installations by the Taliban. There was a response by the United States military in Helmand. And then also over the weekend, we've seen this attack at the political rally where Dr. Abdullah was there. A lot of political leaders were there. But in this case, the Taliban did not claim this attack. It was IS. So, where does the peace process go after this?
There is a question mark on the peace deal and the future of Afghanistan. After a series of talks between the United States administration and the Afghan Taliban, then they became able that they signed a deal on 29th February. And of course, the world welcomed it, including Pakistan, who also played a role of facilitator. But on the other hand, the only Taliban are not there in Afghanistan, some other insurgent groups, and the biggest one, that is the ISIS, or Islamic State of Khorasan in Afghanistan, that is there. Although they are not much in number, and now they are in few hundreds, right? The active fighters of IS Khorasan, they are just in few hundreds, but still they are active, and there are many reasons for that. One reason that they were not involved in the peace process because they are very much harsh towards the foreign troops, especially the US administration. Another thing that they are also the rival force of the Afghan Taliban. So Afghan Taliban and ISIS, they have been fighting in Afghanistan. So that's why American administration only welcomed the Taliban to have negotiations with one another. So even in December last year, American General Miller, he stated that although they are few in number, but still they are very much aggressive, and it could be a threat for the future peace of Afghanistan. So now the last Saturday's deadly attack, it proved that yes, it can be a threat. Now this is how ISIS wants to try and to realize their presence in Afghanistan. On the one hand, they have to they have to give you know, a lesson, a kind of lesson to the US administration by not involving and inviting them for negotiations. And on the other hand, they have also to have their adjustment in space in Afghanistan's future while giving tough time to the Afghan Taliban. So such kind of attacks, those were expected, and now this time from the ISIS. So very much possible that in future it can be and it will be done if the situation persists in the same way as there even today there are no intra-Afghan dialogue, although those are scheduled for tomorrow, 10th March, in the Norwegian capital Oslo, that intra-Afghan dialogue would be happen. And of course, it's a very good omen for the peace and stability of Afghanistan, that not only negotiations and peace deal occurred between the Afghan Taliban and the US administration, but I think it is more necessary, more important than even the deal to have intra-Afghan dialogue on the one hand between the Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government, but on the other hand between the Taliban and the other political, ethnic, and some warrior and warlike groups of Afghanistan, because now world doesn't see and doesn't you know, want to have that kind of the 1990s situation after the ousting of the Dr. Najib's government and making of that of the Mujahideen government before the rise of Taliban.
Let's just go now to this attack and ISIS. There are people who are claiming, I mean, obviously there are parties who do not want peace in Afghanistan. And we've seen that a lot of flexibility has been shown by the Taliban in this. Even President Ashraf Ghani, to an extent, he didn't swear an oath to become president in order to facilitate the peace talks. However, where now the parties or the countries which do not want peace in Afghanistan, ISIS is this group which was a concern. Throughout the last 18 months we've been discussing it. It was a concern that they might come up in Afghanistan and create problems, which is happening right now. However, there are ISIS people from the defense forces in Afghanistan saying that in ISIS, they found that a large number of them have been trained by the Indian intelligence agencies, because that country does not wish for there to be this peace deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and for the power sharing to change.
Yes, this is a concern, of course, because India was not there in the peace deal between the Afghan Taliban and the US administration, and even the Indian sources, Indian dailies such as Times of India also was very much worried about the ousting of the India from the Afghanistan's future, because if we see in the post 9/11 for the last 18 and 19 years, India had been very much active in the Afghanistan's economy and especially in Afghanistan's politics. So that's why it wanted to have an Indian narrative over there, and it was very much, I would say, successful how it carried out various activities and by developing a narrative which was very much pro-India. So by not having a part of this negotiation process where most of the countries, they welcomed it and they supported, even Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, China, all of the important regional countries, they supported this process. But on the other hand, India was there, which was keeping out from this process. So that was a big hurdle for India, have to accommodate itself.
Right,
So,
and now we've seen that the United States, President Trump has just visited India, and they've got this agreement on defense, etc. Now, it's very important for President Trump to bring about peace in Afghanistan and the reduction of violence and troop withdrawal, which is scheduled to take place in 14 months. So, isn't this a point to ponder over by the Americans, that this very important peace process in Afghanistan is being thwarted by the Indians?
yes, on the one hand, if we see, so since 2016, the defense relationship between India and America, that has been on the way of, to have more strengthened, especially in Obama administration, this initiative was taken, and now this Trump administration is just endorsing it and cementing it more and more. So, of course, the US administration has to make realize India that now it's your turn, that how you can play a role, positive role for stability of Afghanistan. Even it's also in the interest of India, if it considers, because now India, alongside with Pakistan, is a permanent member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So the Central Asian republics, including Afghanistan, they are landlocked countries and they have no direct access to the open seas, and that is only possible through Pakistan and through Iran, but the shortest way that is there is Pakistan. So now India is also developing its relationship, especially the energy and the economic relationship with Central Asian republics. So that's why peace is very much imperative and essential for the entire region.
Absolutely.
So it will not only disturb, so if there is instability in Afghanistan, will not only disturb Afghanistan and Pakistan, but of course India and other regional countries as well.
And it's also working contrary right now to US interests, the Indian government right now in Afghanistan, after all this effort, and at a critical point this is happening to thwart the peace process. However, now we know that there's 14 months left to the troop withdrawal, and according to the agreement. And when we saw in 1989 the US left after the Soviets were defeated in Afghanistan, we saw that there was a civil war. And right now, just days after the peace agreement, there were these attacks that took place. Is it kind of worrying that once the US does withdraw from Afghanistan, similar infighting might take place? Because Afghans haven't really been known to work together in the past to create a government, etc. They've been known to sort of have conflicts.
Such kind of things are likely to happen, but I think it depends on the intra-Afghan dialogue. The peace deal between Afghan Taliban and the US has already taken place. That is over there. So far it is successful, but even the future will decide that how much the commitments the parties they have made with one another, how much they are fulfilled. And the second thing, that is the intra-Afghan dialogue, that on what kind of conditions the Taliban and the Afghan government they would meet and they would discuss the future of Afghanistan. On the other hand, what kind of conditions will be laid down between the Afghan Taliban and other Afghan groups, and also between the Afghan government and other Afghan groups. So all these things depend on the intra-Afghan dialogue, which is very critical,
and the violence is not going to help that. We have online with us another guest who's a senior analyst, Air Vice Marshal Faiz Amir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us online.
Welcome.
Sir, we were talking about what's been happening lately in Kabul and in Afghanistan after the peace agreement. And right now we've seen this violence that's erupted within a week of the peace agreement. And now a critical part of the peace agreement between the United States and the Taliban was that the Taliban will not allow the use of its soil against any foreign country. And going forward, how will the Taliban or any government prevent these kind of groups like ISIS from doing the attacks that they've been doing in Kabul?
Actually, first of all, this was not a peace agreement between Taliban and the U.S. U.S. government. This was an agreement on withdrawal of forces from occupation forces from Afghanistan. So, but the next steps were obviously the peace process was to be started between the two Afghan groups, that is the Afghan government and the Taliban.
Right.
But neither of them represented the either side in entirety. It means the Afghan government did not represent the entire people who were not in Taliban group, and Taliban leaders did not represent everybody who was not on the government side. Now, what we have seen is this has been being discussed at length in our media, in our world over, that probably this was the most fragile kind of an arrangement that the Taliban and the U.S. government reached. Most were of the view that these were the need of the Trump government, considering the election year. But
Right.
there were apprehensions that were allayed, that were aired by our foreign minister, by our government, that there are spoilers who would try and spoil the ongoing process, the process that would lead eventually to a peace agreement.
Right.
But if you
And
look at
sir,
it,
can you
those
can we go into a bit of detail about these spoilers? At this point, we know that President Ashraf Ghani had agreed earlier in the U.S. Afghan government talks that about a prisoner release, and that was part of the agreement with the Taliban as well. And he sort of backtracked on that. What are the other spoilers that we're seeing over in this whole process?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that Mr. President Ashraf Ghani did not represent everybody outside the Taliban sphere. And that means Abdullah has taken his own oath, and he has established his own parallel government, a parallel setup. And so he is one of the persons who probably would not want the Ashraf Ghani government to succeed in any kind of negotiations. He would actually be trying to be the third party for eventual agreement that they may reach in the division of political prowess, political power in the country. So he will demand his own pound of flesh from the government. The government would itself look for some greater influence in the next setup. And on the Taliban side, we were always of the view that Taliban do not represent the entire opposition. There are warlords and there are drug lords, those who would probably try to get their own pound of flesh from both the sides. So these are all the spoilers who probably would not like the negotiations to come to a conclusive agreement so soon.
Right. So does this mean that the road to peace is going to be a difficult one and a rocky one that we saw recently? Mr. Sirajuddin Haqqani, he wrote an editorial in the New York Times, an opinion that, a letter to the editor about him wanting an all-inclusive government, the Taliban wanting that in Afghanistan. However, you're saying there are all these other warlords and the drug lords, etc. And then you also have the civil society in Afghanistan. So how shaky is this process going to be going forward, since it's not only, like you said, the Taliban who is responsible?
The success of the entire process that would lead to an eventual agreement that could be called a peace agreement would largely depend upon the American willingness to stay in Afghanistan, at least politically, and either persuade all members from their side, from the side of the Abdullah, the warlords, the Ashraf Ghani government and their allies, to commit themselves to a process that eventually leads to a conclusive agreement. I think unless that side is fully on board and that side is fully committed to the peace process, there are very large obstacles in the process of any agreement.
Now, Dr. Manzoor Afridi, our studio guest, I'd like to come to you now. That we've seen that President Ashraf Ghani is adamant to start his new term in power, and we've seen that he sort of backtracked on the agreements that he made. And today, like the Air Vice Marshal mentioned, Dr. Abdullah has also taken oath. How are all these factors now going to affect what's going to happen going forward?
I think there was no way because last time in 2014 this was happened is the chief executive Abdullah was in opposition to President Ashraf Ghani, and he was not accepting the election results. And now this time it was also postponed the swearing to have as president of Afghanistan by Ashraf Ghani. One reason was not accepting the results and not to have free and fair the mechanism of the election commission of Afghanistan. And second, that was that Ashraf Ghani government was also waiting for a peace deal between the Afghan Taliban and the US administration. But now all these things happened. So that's why again that setup is there where Ashraf Ghani was the president and Abdullah was the chief executive, and now they are also having the same pattern. So let's hope that it work in future, and it also to have play their very much positive role, not only with the Afghan Taliban but also with other Afghan leaders and Afghan groups.
Right. Okay. And Air Vice Marshal Faiz, I wanted to now come to you. Okay, the Air Vice Marshal is not online anymore. He got disconnected. So, sir, now I wanted to ask you this, that do you think that President Ashraf Ghani will eventually listen to the US? Because we know that President Donald Trump has an election coming up, later on this year. He spoke to Mullah Baradar on the phone. He sounded very hopeful after speaking to him as well. And he will have to show some sort of peace in Afghanistan when this election time comes, because the United States public is now war weary. They don't want to see further war. It's an 18-year-old long drawn-out war with many of their veterans have been killed. So their soldiers have been killed, and then you also have their veterans who are injured and are suffering post-traumatic stress and a lot of different problems, and their economy. Trillions of dollars have been spent there. So do you think that everybody is going to, especially President Ashraf Ghani, going to come back sort of on the same page as the United States?
I think because there is no way for President Ashraf Ghani. That also depends on the American commitment, and America is telling to Ashraf Ghani to have on negotiations with the Afghan Taliban and also to release some 5,000 of the Taliban fighters. Second thing, it can also hinder the way of negotiations between the Taliban and the government. So that's why for a smooth running of the government, for having trust building, and for having release of these prisoners from the both sides. So President Ashraf Ghani is very much likely to have negotiations with the Afghan Taliban, because there's also I think necessary for the Afghan government to be there in existence, because now after the deal, Afghan Taliban, they are more powerful because they have got the confidence now, even political confidence and confidence from the Afghan public as well. Even American President Trump has also tweeted about the government formula in Afghanistan, and Trump has said that Afghan Taliban they have to overcome the Afghan government. So it is an indication that now President Ashraf Ghani has to sit with the Afghan Taliban and to negotiate all the terms, because now at this stage in Afghanistan there are two big we can say the players from the Afghanistan, one Afghan Taliban and another that is the Afghan government. So it is, I think that they will sit together and will settle all issues, because without having negotiations, they can't settle the peace and future of Afghanistan, and God forbid that another civil war may break out.
So the Oslo talks, like you said earlier, that they're supposed to be taking place tomorrow. Tomorrow is the 10th of March, the day that they're supposed to have the intra-Afghan talks. And it's just, right there in front of us right now, yet we're seeing just 2 days back this attack. Okay, that wasn't the Taliban. There was an earlier attack, then the US attacked back.
Yes.
And the Foreign Minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, earlier said that there is some progress, that some development is taking place with the prisoner release. This is sort of very last minute, and everybody's sort of sitting on edge, wondering whether this is actually going to happen. Do you think the talks will happen tomorrow?
I hope that it will happen, because again, I would say no way for the future of Afghanistan except negotiations, except the intra-Afghan dialogue. So it will happen maybe tomorrow, day after tomorrow, a month later. Yes, but eventually it will happen. The Afghan Taliban, the Afghan government, and even the Afghan public masses, all of them, they are scared of fighting. They are tired of fighting. They are tired of, hunger. So this is a right time and a high time for them to have political stability, economic growth, and very much a peaceful environment in Afghanistan.
Right, and you mentioned earlier that Russia and China are also supporting this peace deal and the way forward with the intra-Afghan dialogue. Now, where China is concerned, what are the chances that Afghanistan will be an active member of the Belt and Road Initiative and be part of this regional connectivity, because it is in a crucial position between, say, also Pakistan and the Central Asian states, etc. So, in your opinion, do you think it will become part of this whole regional connectivity?
Afghanistan is a connector between Central Asia and South Asia. Its strategic geographical location is very much significant, especially after the launching of this BRI, Belt and Road Initiative of China. Another thing, that Afghanistan is also a part of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is an observer, as Pakistan was there since 2005.
Right.
Now Pakistan is a permanent member. Right. So when a peace and political stability will come in Afghanistan, so Afghanistan will be permanent member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, because it shares common border with Uzbekistan, with Tajikistan, with Turkmenistan. So it is also a kind of part of Central Asia. Another thing, for the successful projects of China, whether those are energy projects, economic or mineral projects, some other one, in Central Asia, peace in Afghanistan is important.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, because even Afghanistan is also taking keen interest in China-Pakistan economic corridor. Afghanistan is also, part of the TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India pipeline. Afghanistan is also part of the Lapis Lazuli corridor. Okay. So this Central Asia, South Asia, also Middle East, in future, it will be a hub of corridors. So peace and stability in Afghanistan, it will drag Afghanistan into more limelight of positive environment. And China is there. China is there in INEC project, INEC copper project in Afghanistan. So it is one of the biggest investors in Afghanistan nowadays.
So peace is crucial for all of this development to take place for the entire region. Thank you so much, Dr. Manzoor Afridi, for joining us today on our program. After the break, we'll continue our program. Stay with us, please. Welcome back to our program. The UN Conference on Trade and Development has said that Pakistan is on the list of the 20 most affected countries by the production slowdown in China due to the coronavirus. So we're going to be talking about that on today's program. Today we have with us a senior economist, Mr. Zia Bande, who's also a senior fellow of the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on our program again. And sir, now the slowdown in China, the production, this is affecting the global economy. This is affecting Pakistan. It's affecting the European Union. It's affecting the United States, the United Kingdom. So let's begin with Pakistan and other countries as well. But in Pakistan, textiles are being hit because of this value chain disruption.
Okay, when you're talking about effect on the economy, so every economy has a different effect. It depends upon how much integrated you are with the world economy. As far as Pakistan is concerned, if you are aware of it, Pakistan has low trade to GDP ratio. Those countries are more affected which have higher trade to GDP ratio, or which is basically driving value for more of the service economy. If you are more into the service economy, where you have face-to-face interaction, so if you have disruptions in hospitality industry, in airline industry, people are not traveling, they are not coming into the open, that is going to affect more those economies. As far as Pakistan is concerned, yes, we have an exposure to China. That's, I mean to say, important. But I think so we don't have to panic that much. What we are looking at, yes, we only even don't have a full effect of 1 quarter yet of this coronavirus. And what we are already seeing that it is slowing down in China. Okay, factories are resuming their production lines. Okay, so what is important that there could be 3 scenarios for China if you're talking from the Chinese perspective. One is low scenario, low risk scenario. Second is medium, and third is high. So if we're talking about low risk, how much the GDP is going to shave off from the Chinese, how much their imports are going to shave off, how much exports they are going to shave off. So they are the important factors which we, and different economists have different, I mean to say, forecast for this thing. So as far as our understanding is concerned, the Chinese government capacity cannot be underestimated in managing it. And it can, whatever we tell them, that this is an authoritarian regime, but they are better equipped as compared to US or Western world in order to handle this coronavirus thing, and which they are doing. So I'm very cautiously optimistic.
The Western world, as you just mentioned, in China, the Chinese authorities have actually taken the bull by its horns. It's doing everything it can. A lot of things, building hospitals within days, etc. And yet you're seeing a total contrast. The people in the United States are complaining that President Trump doesn't even take this virus seriously, like it's any issue at all. And there's no free screening like the Chinese have. There's very little access over there to proper healthcare facilities where they can actually be told whether somebody has it, been in contact, etc. So there is a huge contrast there in certain Western countries and the US, and flights, etc. No caution is being taken over there right now.
You're perfectly right. That's the difference between the governance system between the two countries. In US, if you know, majority of the people, they don't have sick pay leaves.
No.
They don't have the universal health care system in US.
No, they don't. And they have 2 weeks leave every year. So
unfortunately, if anything goes like that, people are not going to sit at home. They have to go out and earn their living in US. Now that's a difference. Second thing, US is a federal state. So it means that the federal government has limited leeway to work around with the states also. So that is also a problem, a coordination problem. This coordination problem is not there in China.
Right. You have one party system.
One party system. So whatever the party declares, even the provinces or cities, everybody follow that. But it won't be happening in America the way it is. So what is in America? You have a very polarized political spectrum there. So there is a blame game. This is an election year. So it means Democrats and Republicans will be each other's throat. And who's going to suffer from that is an American economy and American public.
Right, exactly.
You understand that point? So what is important for us to understand that we should pray that with this advent of the summers, this normally the seasonal flu goes down. So if it goes down, so we might be safe from that misery which will come on our way. Otherwise, you are perfectly right. US is not that much geared like China to handle this epidemic.
And sir, what about Pakistan? Like you were saying, okay, it will not affect our economy that much. It's about $44 million worth of value chain in Pakistan textiles has been affected. And that's not a huge number. It's not in the billions or something. But however, we are a small economy and everything affects us. So any small disruption also affects us. And also the healthcare system here. I mean, the WHO has said the biggest concern is for developing countries countries that don't have a proper healthcare setup, and we know that our healthcare system is still very, it needs a lot of improvement. However, the authorities have been taking good care of it. So in your opinion, do you think this will be managed in every sense, you know, for the economy as well as otherwise for Pakistan?
No, what I'm not talking about the level of preparedness in Pakistan. That is not there. We should not be optimistic about it. But fortunately, we are not that much integrated. Our people are not traveling that much. Just look our neighboring Iran, how it came into a factor, because the people are traveling on those all sacred places. So people are coming from outside also. So that's why they were become affected, the victim of that. That's why Saudis took that precaution. And I think so at that time, which people were saying that Pakistan is banning people from coming to China, to Pakistan, that also played. It means the government has taken a cautionary measure in that. So what is important for us to understand that we should not create a panic like that. Every economy is different. Every way, the way the people are traveling is different. So these two things becomes a very important in order to estimating the impact of this coronavirus on an economy. So I'm cautiously optimistic that Pakistan is not going to affect a lot. As you have yourself mentioned, 44 million or 45 million for an economy which is over 300 billion is not much of an effect. And I hope, because the way is going to work out, when your economy is going to go down worldwide also, it will create opportunities for Pakistan also, especially in the textile side. So it means that when it will come back, so we will be the beneficiary of that also. No? We will be gaining from that.
Currently, Qatar has stopped the Pakistani passengers from entering the country now. And however, like you said, that you know, the cases here are not as many as we're seeing, like you're saying, in Iran and on Italy. They cancelled their carnival, and they've now stopped
football matches also.
Football matches in Milan. There's been a shutdown as well of tourists, etc. So a lot of places, Umrah, I mean, for the first time we're seeing, you know, being suspended. So all of this that's happening around the world, how does this affect, I mean, tourism, everything, air travel? The people coming and going from Dubai have to have a mandatory quarantine over there once they arrive back home. All these measures that different countries are taking, it's bound to disrupt the overall flow of systems.
Obviously, I'm not discounting that, but what we are saying that why these things are happening, why it didn't happen 10 years before when we have SARS? Because as of today, the economies are more integrated, people are traveling more. That's why they are stopping people from, just from a cautious perspective.
Absolutely.
All these countries, no, I mean to say Saudi depends on Umrah. Likewise, Iran, they depends on people coming from outside. Italy depends on people from coming outside. So all these countries are taking cautions. So the point is this, there are two parts of the story. One part which is really taking place on the ground, and what's the quantum. And second part is the sensationalism done by the global media. So we have to cut through the things.
Right.
So what is the real material impact? We should not go along with the media sensationalism, because I'm saying it very with a amount of confidence that that's the way they basically sell their news stories. Otherwise, on reality, I mean to say, I'm not discounting the impact of it. Just in Pakistan, you have, I mean to say, a few days back, one of a gentleman, he has recovered from coronavirus. Nobody is, we don't have a vaccination yet, but people are recovering, not only in Pakistan, in China, in Italy, in every country.
Yeah, about 25,000 people.
25,000 people. So we are not talking about that. Media is only talking about people who are dying. They are unfortunate.
That's what creates fear. Thank you so much, Mr. Zia Badir, for joining us on our program today and talking about this very important topic, because the economy definitely matters, and Pakistan is struggling on so many fronts as it is. Thank you again for joining us. And also, Aurat March took place yesterday, Sunday, on March 8th, and we saw a very large turnout all over the country. We saw women, men, transgenders, and also children. Everybody was out there marching for the rights, the equal rights of women in Pakistan. Now, most of these marches were organized by a diverse group of organizers, and they took place in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Quetta, Multan, Sakkar and Hyderabad, as well as other cities. And the main purpose was to highlight the injustice and inequality that women in Pakistan face on a daily basis. Some of the main themes that were addressed were gender violence, discrimination of women, harassment was addressed as well, and the misogynistic and patriarchal values that exist in many of the regions in our country right now. So, for example, when the excitement over a boy child as opposed to a girl child, and the less resources spent on girl children in families, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. So a lot of these things were addressed, and then we also saw in Islamabad that simultaneous rally by religious groups actually pelted stones and threw shoes at very peaceful protesters that were out there for the Aurat March. So that was a very unfortunate incident. And a lot of renowned personalities and political leaders also took part in this. A lot of women who are very famous and well known were part of these rallies. So that's what happened yesterday. Now, also, a very, very tragic incident that took place was that a colonel of the Pakistan Army was martyred in Dera Ismail Khan. The martyred officer's name was Colonel Mujibur Rahman, and he is survived by a widow, 3 sons and a daughter, according to the ISPR. This operation was launched against terrorists who were hiding out near the Tank area of Dera Ismail Khan, where the colonel was martyred. And according to the ISPR, as soon as troops scored in the area, terrorists opened fire, and during the operation, 2 terrorists were killed. In intense exchange of fire, Colonel Mujibur Rahman embraced martyrdom. So that was a very unfortunate incident indeed, and we all value and respect the sacrifices given by the armed forces of Pakistan. And also, finally, today is Holi, and Prime Minister Imran Khan tweeted earlier that wishing all our Hindu community a very happy and peaceful Holi, the festival of colors. And from PTV World as well, we wish all of our Hindu viewers a very happy Holi as well. That's all for the program today. Thank you for watching Newsroom, and we'll see you next time.